Podcasts, millions of podcasts. The problem is too many choices. How do you choose a podcast that you can use to improve your active listening? Don't worry, I've got you covered with a simple 3-step formula that'll help you find your perfect podcast match. Let's get started.
Hooray!
I had a comment a few days ago asking what is the best podcast to listen to. There is no one podcast that is the best for everyone. It depends. The best podcast is the podcast that works for you. You need to spend a little more time to find just the right one. But when you do, it will fit you like a well-made custom suit. You know, when you buy clothes, you don't go and find clothes that don't fit you. You find clothes that fit you. You should spend a little more time finding a podcast that will fit you, and then it works better. You will learn much more, understand more, and enjoy listening more. Finding the perfect podcast is easy if you follow a simple 3-step formula, which I will be sharing. That extra effort of finding a podcast that fits you to a T will be worth it. Self-learning is very powerful because you can choose learning that suits your needs. If you're stuck in a boring class learning things that are too simple or too difficult, you don't like it. When you're doing self-learning, you can enjoy the learning when you want and actually feel that you're improving. But please, watch until the very end to get all 3 steps. You're not going to find the perfect podcast if you only know 1 or 2 steps. Before we jump into the formula, there's one important thing you need to know. First, you need to know that there are certain podcasts that will be just perfect for you. It starts with understanding. If you can understand most of the podcast without a dictionary, it's very effective for you. If you understand everything in the podcast, that's not good for you. You need a podcast that you can understand most of what is being said, but leaves you to stretch yourself to understand more. So, what is the exact percentage of understanding that's ideal for you? When it comes to improving your active listening skills through podcasts, there's no fixed percentage that works for everyone. However, experts do agree, and they suggest aiming for a comprehension level of between 60 to 80% as a good target for learning active listening and anyone who wants to improve their overall understanding. Here's a breakdown of what different comprehension levels might look like. 90 to 100% means you're likely listening to content that's too easy and may not be challenging enough to improve your skills significantly. 70 to 80%. This is often considered an ideal range. You understand most of the content, but are still challenged by some vocabulary or concepts. 60 to 70%. You're grasping the main ideas, but missing some details. This level can be good for pushing your skills, but make sure you're not getting frustrated. Below 60%. The content may be too difficult, potentially leading to frustration and diminished learning returns. Don't try to find podcasts that are too difficult. You will give up very quickly. To improve your active listening skills effectively, choose podcasts slightly above your current comprehension level. Focus on understanding the main ideas rather than trying to understand every single word. Take notes or summarize what you've heard after listening. Re-listen to challenging sections. That's one of the advantages of podcasts. You can re-listen to them. gradually increase the difficulty of the content that you're consuming. So this may take some time. It may take you a few weeks, it may take you a few months, but gradually you move your listening level up. Remember, the goal is to challenge yourself while still maintaining a good level of comprehension, one that allows for learning and engagement. As your listening skills improve, you can move up to more difficult content. Just find your sweet spot, and that's where the magic starts to happen. Well, it turns out our brains are pretty amazing at filling in the gaps. When you understand most of what's being said, your brain can use context clues to figure out the rest. And that's very useful in a conversation where you're listening to someone. You can actually start to guess the words that they're using without knowing them. It's like a workout for your ears and your mind. If you can't understand at least 60% of the content, the podcast is probably too difficult or advanced for you right now. Don't worry though. There are, like I said, there are millions of other options available, so just keep looking. Now, here's the good part. Let's dive into our 3-step formula for choosing the perfect podcast to level up your listening game. Step number 1, identify your interests and goals. The first step in our formula is all about you. What are you passionate about? What topics are you excited about? Are you a sports fanatic, a history buff, or a tech geek? Maybe you're into true crime stories or love learning about different cultures. Whatever floats your boat, there's a podcast out there for you. And it's important to get a range of podcasts, not just English learning material or English related content. In fact, I would say try to avoid podcasts from English learning textbooks. They are just too artificial. The language is too formal and does not let you learn common, everyday spoken English. Start by making a list of your top interests. And when you're talking to people, you want to have things that you can talk about, not just, I'm trying to improve my English, can you help me? I want to speak to you. Don't hold back. Be very specific. The more specific you are, the better your choice will be. For example, instead of just sports, look for European soccer or Olympic swimming. This will help you narrow down your options later. Next, think about your listening goals. Are you trying to improve your general comprehension? Or maybe you want to focus on understanding specific accents or dialects. Perhaps you're preparing for a language proficiency test and you need to practice with academic content. Write down your goals alongside your interests. Remember, the key to sticking with a podcast is to find content that you enjoy listening to. If you're really interested in the topic, you'll be more motivated to keep listening, even when it gets challenging. Plus, you'll probably already know some vocabulary related to your interests, which will give you a head start. Step number 2, assess your current listening level. Now that you know what you want to listen to, it's time to figure out where you're starting from. So this is the critical step because it helps you find podcasts that hit that 60 to 80% sweet spot that we talked about earlier. Now start by listening to a variety of podcasts on your chosen topics. Pay attention to how much you understand without looking up words or rewinding. Don't worry about understanding every single word. Remember, we're aiming for that 60 to 80% range. As you listen, ask yourself these questions. Can I follow the main ideas of the conversation? Do I understand most of the vocabulary being used? Can I keep up with the speed of speech? Am I able to distinguish between different speakers? If you consistently answer yes to these questions, you're probably getting close to the correct range. If you're struggling to understand even half of what's being said, you need to look for simpler content. Here's a pro tip. Most podcast apps let you adjust the playback speed. If you find a podcast you love, but it's a bit too fast, try slowing it down to 0.8x or 0.9x speed. Then you don't have to say, "Can you speak slower?" It will do it for you. As your skills improve, you can gradually increase the speed back to normal. Step number 3, research and sample podcasts. Now here's the fun part, finding the perfect podcast match. With your interests, goals, and current level in mind, now it's time to start exploring. Here are some ways to find potential podcasts. Use podcast directory platforms like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Google Podcasts. They have extensive directories that you can browse by category. Ask for recommendations. Join online language learning communities or forums and ask for podcast suggestions based on your interests and level. Don't go on and say, "What's the best podcast?" Again, we're trying to get you to find a podcast that's good for you, not a general podcast that everyone likes and thinks is good. I've included episodes of my 5-minute English vocabulary podcast on this channel. Feel free to have a listen. And remember, don't use subtitles. If they suit you, keep listening to them. But if they don't match your needs, look somewhere else. I won't be offended. I want what's best for you. Once you've got a list of potential podcasts, it's time to sample them. Many podcasts have episode descriptions. Look for topics that interest you. Listen to the first few minutes of several podcasts to get a feel for the podcast's style, pace, and difficulty level. As you sample different podcasts, keep that 60 to 80% rule in mind and make notes. Are you understanding enough to follow along? Is it challenging but not overwhelming? If a podcast feels too easy, don't dismiss it right away. It might be perfect for passive listening while you're doing other tasks. Consider these factors as you listen. Is the content relevant? Does the podcast cover topics that you're interested in? Speaking style. Do you enjoy the host's voice and presentation style? Episode length. Are the episodes a manageable length for your schedule? Production quality. Is the audio clear and easy to understand? Some podcasts offer a transcript of their podcasts, but please don't get them. Please don't get them. You will not improve your listening. You will become lazy. You will just read the transcript instead. The purpose of a podcast is to listen and learn. Trust me, listening without a transcript is much more effective. The 30 to 40% that you do not understand will become clear if you will just trust your brain to work a little bit more. Remember, it's okay to try out several podcasts before finding the right fit. When you're looking for clothes, sometimes you try several items before you pick one. That's the same with choosing a podcast right for you. Everyone's learning journey is different, so what works for someone else might not work for you. So let's put it all together. Let's recap our 3-step formula for choosing the perfect podcast to improve your listening skills. First, identify your interests and goals. Your interests and goals. Step number 2, assess your current listening level. And 3, research and sample podcasts. By following these steps and keeping the 60 to 80% comprehension rule in mind, you'll be well on your way to finding podcasts that not only improve your listening skills, but also keep you entertained and motivated. So there you have it, folks, your guide to choosing the perfect podcast for boosting your listening skills. Remember, the key is to find content that's both interesting and challenging, but not overwhelming. Stick with that 60 to 80% sweet spot, and you'll be amazed at how quickly your listening skills improve. Don't be discouraged if you don't find the perfect podcast right away. It might take some trial and error, but I promise it's worth the effort. And hey, you might discover some awesome new interests along the way. Before we wrap up, here's one last tip. Make podcast listening a regular part of your routine. Even 15 to 20 minutes a day can make a big difference over time. You could listen while commuting, doing your chores, or winding down before going to sleep. So what are you waiting for? Get out there and start exploring the wonderful world of podcasts. Your ears and your brain will thank you. If you found this video useful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with anyone who wants to quickly improve their conversation skills. And drop a comment below with your favorite podcasts for improving listening skills. Let's help each other out. Until next time, it's Herbert Lee wishing you happy listening and happy learning.